My name's Billy. I'm a recovered drug addict.
Billy.
And thank you, Jeremy, for inviting me to do this, and for the group for having me. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a, I don't know that I have some deep understanding of this book or some deep understanding of this process. I have some experience with it. And I was thinking earlier, I was like, I don't know that the guys that wrote this book maybe had a deep understanding of this stuff either. From what I understand, what I've learned is that these guys were roughly around the same sobriety time as me when this book got written. I could be wrong on that, but I think they were in a matter of 4, 5, 6 years, something like that, when they decided to engage in like a conquest to change the world and change lives, and I was thinking it's funny, right? Because, my day off was Monday and I'm cleaning my house. And I'm like getting angry because I think my wife should be doing it. And I start an argument and she's not even home though, right? She's at work. And I'm having a full-blown argument with her and I'm playing her part and I'm imagining what she's going to say to what I'm saying, and I'm responding. And we're going through this and I'm going through this and I clean the house and then she gets home and she has no idea we're in a fight, but we are in a fight. All of this energy that's coming off of me, it's clear that there's something wrong. And she's like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "Nothing. Just been cleaning all day. Just cleaning the house all day." And I got to thinking, and it's Monday night, and so a bunch of us go to these different halfway houses in the community and stuff, and I get to thinking about what we're going to talk about at the halfway house tonight and stuff like that. And I don't know, I can't explain it, or I don't understand it, but like this, she just melted away. I wasn't angry anymore. It was weird how this stuff worked. It just kind of just wasn't angry anymore. 30 minutes later when she said, "What are you cooking for dinner?" I got all angry again. So shouldn't you be doing that? And I have this ego on me that wants to I have this rationalization, whatever you want to call it. It's this mind on me that's like, I work like twice as many hours as her every week, so she should do twice as much stuff around the house, right? Like, you're home twice as much as me, you should be doing twice as much stuff around the house. And she does, actually, you know what I'm saying? So, and I don't know if that's a little insight into the kind of mind I got on me, Just so we're going to be talking about 6 and 7 tonight. My experience with this, if I'm honest, at the beginning of this deal, when I'm going through this work with a sponsor, I'm like a few months sober, and I think 6 and 7 is like nothing. It's easy. It's like, read a couple paragraphs. There's not much to really do here, and turns out that this has been like without me really even knowing it, has been kind of the guiding process in an attempt to, I heard they say, like, the opposite of addiction is connection or something. I don't know who they are or whatever, but I heard it and I liked it, right? So now I say it all. Don't really know what it means, right? But I do know that I got sold out pretty early that, the solution to my problem is going to be a connection with a power greater than me. And what we find in this 5, 6, and 7 kind of deal, that I don't know if everybody does it this way, but my sponsor, we did this like at the same time. You know what I'm saying? 5, 6, and 7 all at the same time. And these are the things that are blocking me from this connection, right? And it's like, that made sense to me, okay? But, just a little background, I guess, and then I'll get into a little bit with the 2 paragraphs I have to work with here, I hear a lot of guys talk about this long road of getting loaded and this slow burning down of their lives or whatever, and that's just not my experience. I started getting loaded when I was 15, and I was in rehab at 16. It happened quick, and for me, I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. This thing for me started with alcohol. This was the first thing I ever did. I was in rehab before I ever touched any drugs. You know what I'm saying? Now, got strung out on all kinds of stuff after that. Went down the opiates route. When I think about my life being unmanageable, it was very unmanageable during that couple years. I was listening to this. Jeremy sent me the the DAA speaker lineup for the last 2 months or whatever, like, I guess to prepare, and I've listened to all of it, every word of it, and, there's this, this idea that, like, Jeremy said in his talk or whatever that, like, 2008 or 2009, like, it was popping around here. I think he said popping. I think that was the word he used. It was like popping around here in Florida, and I was like, yes, it was. I was right in the middle of that thing, man. And, I don't know this while it's happening, but prior to ever taking a drink, I was just very concerned about what everybody thought of me, or what I thought they thought of me, or whatever. What I think you think of me, or whatever. I'm suffering from that right now, But, I was always very concerned about what people thought of me, and I've described it for myself as, like, this identity crisis. I got pretty good at kind of putting on a show wherever I'm at, because, there's a part in, I think, the 12 and 12, I think, maybe, or I heard it somewhere or something like that, where it talks about, like, this thing in me is, like, always trying to, this fear that drives me is usually based in some kind of, I'm afraid of losing what I have, or I'm afraid of not getting what I want. And I think they use the word, like, demands or something like that. And for me, it was definitely just, I wanted to be a part of something. It sounds corny or whatever, I've heard a lot of guys say it, but it's just so true for me, right? And I played sports when I was a kid, and I had, I had a good family. My dad got sober like 20-something years ago, and he was a good dude, and I started getting loaded when he was like a few years sober. I just can't even imagine what that was like for him, and like I said, this thing progressed very quick in me, so it was ugly fast. And, he quit his job to stay home and take care of me because I was out of control, and he went out of his way to try to, like, do everything he could to I think in his mind probably keep me from becoming him, or whatever, And at the same time, I'm a middle kid, and my older brother, he's got a whole other set of problems, and my younger brother is like this golden child, he's just like, everybody loves this guy. He talks to everybody easily. If you know him now, I think you could probably picture it, And I just hate him, with like a fire in me, and I learned later that it has nothing to do with him, it had everything to do with me. He was everything that I thought I needed to be or wanted to be, or, he had this way of communicating with his friends, and he always had a girlfriend and all this stuff, and, he took good care of himself, kind of, better than me, and he had nice blonde hair. He had it like this, or whatever. And I didn't, I was, they used to make fun of me. They used to say that I was the adopted kid from Ethiopia. Because you'd have to see my family as a whole. I don't look like I belong there, I'm like hairy and tall and skinny and like dark. And my brother's like white, and my dad's white, and they have blonde hair and blue eyes, and they're like pretty people, and anyways, this is the kind of stuff that, like, for me, this is the kind of stuff that was arising in my life way before I ever got loaded. Now, I don't know this is happening, but when I get loaded for the first time, out of, like, circumstance, there was this girl who showed some interest in me. She was just so weird, right? But I loved her, and I didn't know her very well, but she wanted to come over, and she wanted to pierce my nipples with safety pins, and I let her, and her father, I guess, wasn't around, and her mom worked a lot or whatever, and she lived in the neighborhood, and we would go to her house and we would drink. And I don't remember. I can't recall, like, the first time I got, like, very drunk or whatever. It was with her. It was in that time. And I don't know this is happening at the time, but I experienced something, that I can describe today as, like, this is good. This is good. This is what I want to do. This is what I'm gonna do, right? Like, this is a decision was made. Man, we're gonna do this all the time, as much as possible, and we did. And as I said, this got bad fast, and I ended up in my first quarter of rehab when I was 16, And Jesus, listen, I was I was like, this is like court order rehab. So some of these guys in there are like legit dudes, like, you know what I'm saying, like legit did some things that actually belong there, and I did not. And I remember the first time, this was like a 6-month thing that you're supposed to do. You complete it, because you're young, so you have to go to school, pass the classes, and it's all in this one building or whatever. And you have a uniform, and you're behind a cell door and everything. And I'm supposed to complete this thing in 6 months. And I remember the first time I didn't do something I was supposed to do. I forget what it was. I was like talking during class or something. And I got this write-up that knocks off like a couple weeks of your time or whatever. So you're going to be there a couple weeks later. And in front of everybody, I can't stop crying. Just uncontrollably crying. And, begging them not to do this to me. And I'm calling my mom. I'm like, fix this. I always call my mom. And then as the time went on in this little treatment center, I ended up getting like like an education on like how to like look like I'm not afraid, if that makes any sense. Appear as if I'm not afraid. And I come out of that place, like 11 months later. It's supposed to be 6 months, like 11 months later. And I'm in Palm Harbor now, right? I live in Palm Harbor. Right? I've been running these streets out here in Palm Harbor, and I got a reputation on me. I come out of this place, dude, and everybody has heard somehow that I had beat up some cop and that I had done some time and all this stuff. And let me tell you something, dude, I wore that like a badge, dude. This was just so far from the truth what happened. You know what I'm saying? What happened was I was peeing on a wall, and a cop walked up, and I peed on the cop, right? And then I got arrested for that. That was it. That's all it was, That's all it was. But I ran with this, and let me tell you something. I've told that story, like the fake story, so many times, I started believing that stuff. I started believing that stuff. That was rough around the edges over here, bro, right? You know what I'm saying? And I would go on to tell all kinds of stories that weren't true like that about me to fit in and to whatever I thought. The perception was that, if I acted tough or whatever, then, people, would like me or I wouldn't have to be afraid of them or whatever. I remember my dad, in an attempt to help me, he boxed in the Navy, so he wanted to bring me to this boxing gym to show me some discipline or whatever. I was like 15. So for like the next 10 years, I had trained under Royce Gracie. No, I didn't though, right? Like for the next 10 years, I said that I had been training under Royce Gracie, and I was tall and I was skinny, and all these guys I was fighting were small, and I was a pretty good boxer and all this stuff. And I did one class with this guy, and he told me, you're not gonna cut this. You're not gonna cut it, like you got no discipline, He's like, do 10 push-ups. I couldn't do 10 push-ups, right? Like, and but I used to, so these are the kind of like delusional. The book calls them fancied, right? Which I think is kind of okay. But like this is the kind of stuff that's going on in my head, and I get strung out on all this stuff, and not to go into detail about everything, but at the end there, I got strung out on all this stuff over the years, right? And at the end there, I had got hooked on Suboxone on purpose to get unhooked off of opiates, if that makes any sense. And I started off drinking really heavy. That's how it started. That's how my life started before that first rehab. And that's how it ended. Heavy drinking, morning to night. And I was hooked on these Suboxone. And I remember I went to jail once. And I remember that I detoxed in jail, so I'm as sober as you guys are now. And I am now. And add that in there. And I remember, this is one of a bunch of different times I've done this, but I remember this because my mom was crying on the phone, and she asked, and I think this was like some attempt, she probably heard, she went to Al-Anon, so she probably heard this in Al-Anon or something. This was like some attempt, I think, to scare me, but she was asking me like, where do you want me to bury you? Kind of questions like that, and she's crying. And all I'm thinking about is how I can manipulate this poor woman to come get me out of jail, And my dad, at this point, he's like 15 years sober, and he was just like, leave him where he is. It's best for him. Like, this guy doesn't get me at all, And I would go into these. I would try to put a wedge in between their marriage, because I knew I could manipulate my mom and my dad wasn't having it. And I would try on purpose. I think a lot of times I don't realize what I'm doing, but I knew what I was doing. I was making things up. I was saying things bad about my dad that weren't true. And I was trying to get under my mom's skin. I was trying to get my mom to come get me. I would say anything to get out of jail, but they don't, and I end up coming out of jail, right? And I remember this because I don't know, this was just the weirdest thing. I don't know why I did this, but I wasn't going to get loaded again, right? This was a fact. I had promised my mom. I had made all these declarations. I had, more importantly, I meant it. I believed it. I believed it at the time, Going through like a detox in jail is tough, man, and I meant it. And I don't know what happened, man. I got this idea in my head that, like, I'm better at work when I'm loaded. Like this, I don't know if you've ever been strung out on opiates, you feel like faster at everything you do, and I'm a cook, you know what I'm saying? So I'm like, but I know I can't take any opiates. I've come to realize that, and I haven't since, but I come to realize that. So I decide I'll just get back on Suboxone, right? Now, how crazy is that? I took Suboxone to get off opiates, right? Like, that's the only reason I would ever take Suboxone. And I, like, quote-unquote relapse, or whatever you want to call it. Just kept getting loaded, I guess. But my choice was to go back to Suboxone. And just like anything else I've ever put in my system, this thing kicked off something in me that I couldn't stop taking Suboxone, dude. Couldn't stop taking Suboxone. And in an attempt to get off the Suboxone, I started drinking, just to kind of deal with that, and whatever that is. And that leads me all the way down into... So I go to jail again, and I'm on the phone with my mom again. I'm begging her to I had some money. I had made some money, and I was begging her to come buy me out with my own money, and she wouldn't do it. And I was so mad. I just remember being so angry and just saying all the most hurtful things. And then in like the next breath, I'm like crying, saying how sorry I am, and trying to manipulate her that way and all this stuff. And finally, and she was on the phone with my wife, so they get together and they're like, it's like the same old stuff, just leave them there. Just leave them there. I've heard that so much, just leave them there. Just don't go over there, But anyway, so they make me agree to go to a sober living house, right? If they're going to come buy me out or whatever. And so I was like, yes, I'll do it. And so, like, I don't know, whatever. Just I was trying to be a man of my word or whatever for like the first time or whatever. And so I showed up to this halfway house down in Clearwater. Now this is where I started having an experience with, and I don't realize it at the time, but with this first step, which, and I know we're going to talk about 6 and 7, right? But I don't know how to really do that without getting to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, I think, for me personally, I got no need for any of these other steps if step 1 isn't working. If I'm not in step 1, then I'm certainly not willing to do any of this stuff. But I get sober in this halfway house in Clearwater, and when I say sober, like very loose, right? Just living in a sober house. That's it. Not doing anything else. That is it. I go to the 7 a.m. meeting so I can get on the bus, Serenity Club. I thought it was the goofiest thing. And so I'm at the 7 a.m. meeting. I get on the bus. I'm heading down to Tarpon every day for this job that I have. This is so valuable to me, this job that still wants me around. And they actually paid for the first couple weeks of my halfway house, right? And so now they're like, I put them on this pedestal, like they love me, and they need me, and all that kind of stuff. And I end up out front of this gas station where I used to do all my shopping, right? Cat food and sandwiches and lotto tickets and beer and cigarettes, right? I did all my shopping right there next to the restaurant. My little apartment's over here. And this guy right down the road, right in front of this bus stop, who used to be the guy that worked there, opened up his own little thing, right? And he comes walking out. He sees me at the bus stop, and his eyes kind of light up, and he comes walking out with 2 Mike's harder lemonades, and he offers them to me in an attempt to, like, I will bring my business to him now, right? And I'm 2 months without a drink, right? Physically sober as I am sitting here today. And in my mind, I'm thinking I don't drink anymore, right? I'm sober. I live in a halfway house, right? If I don't live there, I don't live anywhere. You know what I'm saying? Like, I got nowhere else to go. I burn every bridge, you know. And, but I said, you know, what I told him was, I thank you very much, man. I'll see you tomorrow. You know what I mean? It was just that casual. It was nothing. I put these 2 beers in my backpack. I got on the bus with my bicycle. And I think about this today. Like, all the decisions I had to get made before I actually drank the beer. It was insane how many times I never was like, this is a bad idea. Or I probably was. It just didn't matter, I guess. But I drive back, you know, ride the bike back to the halfway house. I pack up everything that I've accumulated over the last couple of months that I can fit into my backpack. I leave the rest, and I go homeless. Knowing I'm going homeless over 2 beers. And I don't realize what's happening in the time is that I'm suffering from powerlessness, you know, and I don't get it. I couldn't articulate that at the time. And what I do is I go, and then there's this one kid that lived in the apartment next to me before I went to this halfway house, and he was like some war vet or something, right? And he got this check every month, and he was weird, and he had no friends, but I was his friend, right? Because he liked to party the way I like to party, and he got money every month, and he would just spend it. And so I knew I could go to his house, so I'd go to his house, and my plan is to just have a couple drinks and hang out at this guy's house and come up with some insane story to tell my wife so she'll let me come live there again. You know what I'm saying? And I end up taking Xanax. I end up snorting some dope. And what ends up happening is, like, 6 weeks go by. I can't even really recall. I didn't draw a sober breath. I just was holed up in this guy's apartment for like 6 weeks, getting loaded with him, and he had nowhere to be, and I was like, I ain't got nowhere to be. And this is just what we did, and I don't really remember much, but I do know that after that, I ended up in a hotel room where I realized somewhere along the way there that I couldn't get enough of this stuff in me. Because what happened was I was sitting around these rooms for those 2 months listening to you guys talk about this deal. And it kind of like dawned on me in the hotel room. I'm like, oh my God, I couldn't get you guys to shut the fuck up. You know what I'm saying? And excuse my language. And I realized I couldn't get enough of this stuff in my body to do anything. And I ended up back at the halfway house. And it's a miracle. I still call it a miracle today, because I called this guy Will, and he's like, we don't have any beds in Clearwater, but we do have a bed out in Pasco. And I was like, yeah, I don't know about Pasco, Pinellas, you know, I've been out to Pasco a couple times, not, you know, last resort, you know what I'm saying? Couldn't find nothing else, had to come out here, right? I just had this really bad idea about Pasco. I remember thinking this, right? I was begging this guy to let me in this house, right? And he's like, you gotta stay sober for 3 days so you can pass the test. He's like, we'll work with you on the weed. So he said, we'll work with you on the weed, but you got to pass for everything else. Because he's asking me, like, what have you been doing? I'm like, it's a lot. You know, been doing all kinds of things, you know. And he's like, all right. So I don't do anything for 2 days by myself in this hotel room with a fridge full of beer and all kinds of other stuff, and it's a miracle. I don't know how. And suffering, you know, physically suffering. And so my wife shows up on the 3rd day to make sure I make it, you know, which is like crazy. And she's not even sober, you know. She's one of us. She gets sober later, but she wasn't even sober, but she just knew somehow. She just knew that I needed this, you know. And I remember I make the 3 days. I call the guy back. He's like, all right, we can do this. And so I start checking the bus routes and stuff because I'm going to have to get back and forth to work. And I remember thinking, like, they only run every hour. Like in Pinellas, they run every half an hour. This is going to be very inconvenient. You know, like, this is just going to be very inconvenient. And maybe I've overthought all this. And, I don't know, you know. And my wife's like, you're going, dude. You're going. You're going. And I remember I lost my wallet on the bus stop, too. It was terrible. It was just a nightmare. But anyways, so I get there, right? And this is some magical stuff happens, man. I show up on a Monday, right? A Monday night. And these guys, from what I come to find out, is called the Fourth Dimension Group. It's an Alcoholics Anonymous group. And they're coming into this halfway house that I happen to be at. And they're happy, and they're joking around, and they're busting each other's balls and stuff, and this and that. And I remember this guy Thomas. He comes walking up. He's got slides on with socks, and I'm judging him, you know. And I'm judging him. He's got his hand out. He's like, "What's up, brother? It's nice to meet you." And I'm like, "No, not for me." You know, like, you know, I'm sure what I was probably like, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here," you know. But in my head, I'm like, "Not for me." You know, this is not for me. And somewhere along the line there, we get talking. The meeting starts, and I'm a little familiar with meetings, but this is not traditional. This is not a traditional meeting. These guys are talking about getting loaded off drugs. They're talking about their stories. They're talking about all this stuff, and they're reading out of this book and this and that, and I'm not hearing any of it really, because what happens is about halfway through this circle of guys, I realize, oh my God, it's gonna get to me. You know what I mean? And I am just, and I don't know none of you guys, right? None of you guys are important to me, but any time I've met anybody ever, I'm so concerned about what you think of me. So I need you to like me immediately. And I don't remember what I said, but I did say, Billy, I'm alcoholic. First time I ever said that with any any honesty. And one of these guys, his name's Josh, and we're just so far apart. Like, there's nothing about our lives that match. But he gets me, he offers to sponsor me, and I'm like, thank God, because I was not going to ask anybody. And we start doing this work, and he's this simple guy, man. He was just, somebody said it once. It might be, I think Chris maybe said it once. He goes, he believes that sponsorship is divinely inspired, right? And I was probably like, yeah, whatever. But I do believe that this was the guy for me, and we sit down and we start doing this work, and we do it fast. My experience with all 12 steps happened in 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, right? So I get sold out on this first step idea. I can identify with the allergy. That's easy. I was all strung out on all kinds of stuff where I started. I couldn't stop. That was easy. I could understand that. But what I couldn't quite articulate was this obsession of my mind that, when I sober up for any period of time, I got this mind on me that just starts working on me. And it's not like, go get loaded, go get loaded, go get loaded. Not for me, at least. It's all this other stuff. It's all this little, just annoying, uncomfortable. Eventually I just become so uncomfortable, and at this point I don't know anything else to do but to get loaded to kind of fix that. And he helps me see that. And then so he basically says, look, the problem is lack of power, man. You got a lack of power. You're powerless. You got a lack of power. And so we go right into step 2, and he goes, all right, well, if the problem is lack of power, then we got to find your power, right? You got to find the power. And he says, do you think that, he said it like, do you believe that I believe? So I was like, yeah, I guess, man. I've known you for a week. You know what I'm saying? I guess you believe. I mean, you're spending your time with me in this halfway house. I know you got a wife at home. I know you probably don't want to be here, So I imagine you got something going on. And but at this point, I had come around these guys at 4D, and it was clear to me. It was obvious. There was something going on. There was something going on that I didn't have, clearly, And so I was willing to believe, I guess, I was like, yeah, man, I guess it's possible. That was a little bit of willingness. It didn't take much. And that whatever all these guys kept talking about, that it could work for me too. And in step 3, he's like, we do this third step prayer, which was probably to date the most uncomfortable thing I've ever done. Was on our knees in this halfway house bedroom with virtually a stranger, virtually a stranger. I've known him for a couple weeks. We do third step prayer, and then he goes, all right. So he basically tells me, listen, if you want to do this third step prayer, make a decision to do the rest of this stuff. Right, so I make a decision. I don't realize that it's the biggest decision that I'm ever gonna make. I don't realize that. I'm just like, yeah, whatever, man. I mean, the halfway house tells me I have to do it. Right? You get all these bonuses if you do it, and I want you to like me. You know what I'm saying? And you said we should do this, right? So I write down this 4 step, and I don't do it in any kind of real good way or anything. And I mean, actually, if I'm just being real honest. It was a couple weeks had gone by, and he kept asking me, "Are you doing the 4 step?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, I'm working on it. I haven't even thought about it, right?" And then we make a deal to meet on a day, and an hour before that time, he's like, "Hey, man, I'm gonna be there in an hour. Are you done?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm done." And then I open the book and write it. That's it. I do it right then. That's it. And I don't know. I don't know if that's good or bad or whatever. I don't know, but that's what I did. And then and then. We do this 5th step, and I had come to terms pretty much that I had caused most of my own problems by this point. That wasn't hard for me to see, but I couldn't understand the level of self-absorption I was suffering from. This self-obsessed way I looked at everything, and the way I viewed the world, and the way I viewed people, and I was able to, in this 5th step, kind of come up with this list of what he called character defects, and it was all manifestations of self. There was all this dishonesty, there was all this fear driving stuff, and we come up with this list, and then he uses the word ideal, right? And I don't know what that means. Ideal, I don't know what that means, but he's basically trying to help me see that if if I know that, because at this point, I had become sold out on the first couple proposals that these steps offer, right? That I'm going to get loaded again if I don't tap into some power. And the only power I know of is the power you guys keep talking about, right? And I get sold out on the idea that I could find it here, right? And I love the idea that all I got to do is go try, right? And that's like kind of 1, 2, and 3 in a nutshell right there for me at early stages of recovery stuff. And so I understand that, you know, these character defects we can identify in this 5th step are what's blocking me from this power. It has been forever, has been blocking me. And so we get into 6 and 7, and so I'll read. And prior to where 6 and 7 starts, kind of I think where the 5th step finishes, we're on page 75, it asks us some questions, right? So it says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. It's very specific, for an hour. I don't know if I did that or not. I can't remember if I did an hour. I don't think I set a timer. You know what I mean? Like, but I did. I went back to the halfway house bedroom. He told me, fucking put your phone on silent. You know, take the hour. Carefully reviewing what we have done. Right? He's talking about the first 5 steps. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. That's a prayer. I didn't know that at the time. We're supposed to pray that. You know, we're supposed to pray to that. But I'm just contemplating. I'm just a man of contemplation. I'm just thinking about it. As I read it, I'm just thinking about it. I'm just thinking about me with it. You know what I'm saying? You know? And taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything. For we are building an ark through which we shall walk a free man at last. And what I come to find out they're asking is that most of us on these 5th step processes don't tell the whole story. You know, and we for me, it was like there's a couple things I'm taking to the grave, dude. Certainly not sharing it with this guy. Because again, I need him to like me, and he certainly won't like me. And the good news was that he shared some stuff that was remarkably similar to what I wasn't going to share. Which is, I don't know, that's coincidence? I don't know. Divinely inspired, maybe, you know. And it kind of just I don't know, I had this moment where I was able to share everything. And I don't ever identify the stuff while it's happening, but I can look back and realize that I got a lot of peace out of that. Like finally saying some of the stuff that I thought was never going to be said. And so, carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we asked if we have omitted anything, which I had, and I did. And then I did admit it. For we are building an ark through which we shall walk a free man at last. You know, and I don't identify it happening at the time, but after that, it was a freeing experience. Is our work solid so far? Yeah, I guess. You know, I don't know. I think I'm doing this to the best of my ability at the time. I think I am. I'm convinced on this first step idea, so I must be, right? I don't know. You know, I heard somebody say this once. I'm doing what they're doing, and their lives are getting good, so mine must be too, right? Something like that was going on in my head. Something I couldn't articulate that. It was something like that was happening though, right? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? If we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6, and we have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? And like a couple steps down the road, they do this thing again where they use these words that I'm not really a big fan of, like all, I got to do all, like it just seems so heavy. It says, entirely ready. All, right? And that to me just seems so heavy. And for the overthinker that I am, I start really questioning it if I even can wrap my mind around and entirely and all that stuff. And what I have come to learn now, which I didn't at the time, I don't think it matters though at the time, is that really the only really requirement here is that I make a beginning, is that I make a start, right? And so I'm ready to, with the very limited understanding I have of this step, sitting down by myself in this room, and I'm looking at this stuff, and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I know I need to, or whatever the thought was, right? Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. That's another prayer that I don't realize it's another prayer we're supposed to do, you know? And I don't know. When ready, we say something like this, and this is the 7-step prayer that I did do. It says, my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. And then it's like, we have then completed step 7. And I'm like, great. That's it. It's easy. I was like, that's great. It's probably the easiest one so far. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm by myself. I got no sponsor here questioning everything I'm talking about. Right? This is great, you know? And you know, I don't know this at the time. But what's happening in my life is, and I can't articulate this at the time, but what's happening is my mind is being kind of shifted. So first of all, what happens is in this 5th step, all these character defects that I have, right? Now when I'm out in the world, like living like the next days and stuff, it's all like big spotlight on all this stuff, right? Now I could see it clearly. That when I couldn't before, I was very delusional. And so now when I'm walking, you know, I'm sitting in this with the 6th step, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, to be honest with you, I'm thinking like, you know, I'm not so bad. You know, like, I'm not so bad. You know, like, yeah, I get it. I could be selfish. I don't understand the level of selfishness I have. I don't understand a lot of this stuff that's going on. But I'm willing to make a beginning, right? And so, as time has gone on for me, like, if I'm being honest, right? Doing these steps that first go around, all 12 of them, I didn't feel anything magical at all, dude. If I'm just being 100% honest, those first couple months, it wasn't, and maybe because I think I sat around here a lot and you guys were all talking about how this thing transformed your lives and all this stuff, but what I think happened was it did it for me too. I just didn't see it or whatever. And what has happened to me as a result of 5, 6, and 7, right, is humility, right? I have become very aware that trying to put my grimy little hands all over my life is getting me nowhere. And I was taught that I could, I was taught that through action is how I'm going to get relief in this deal. And there was a guy that once said, if I could just sit at home and pray this stuff away, I would just be at home praying this stuff away. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't be here tonight. I wouldn't be in halfway houses. I wouldn't be sitting with other men sponsoring guys, trying to take them through the work the way I was taken through the work. I was told that as a how do I word this? There was this walking through 8 and 9, right? I became sold, if that's the right word, right? Through the actions in 8 and 9, you know, and it's probably somewhere between 5 and 9, right? That whole kind of linear, fast thing that we did, I became sold that I was onto something. You know, that there was something going on here and it was good. And I was starting to experience as opposed to like read it, if that makes any sense, or hear it, right? Sitting in these rooms hearing about it, sitting with a sponsor reading about it, right? I started to experience this kind of stuff. And moving forward through the last couple years, you know, 6 and 7 has, without me even realizing, it's funny because Jose sent me like a little workshop or something on 6 and 7, and I was reading it, and I was like, yeah, I do this. I actually do this stuff, you know what I'm saying? But I don't realize, I have trouble articulating this stuff, but if I want to boil it down to like a couple sentences, right? This is about letting go. This is about letting go of me. This is about letting God in. This is about getting out of my own way. This is about giving myself an opportunity to get with Him. You know, if that makes any sense, an opportunity to get with Him. I can't quote it perfectly, but I like it a lot, and I wish I could. But it says something along the lines of if I'm operating under self-sufficiency or self-dependency, there's no room for God dependency or something like that. It says something like that, I don't know. And I like it a lot, and it's been my experience. I have over time now gone hot and cold with this stuff, and I've paid the price both ways. right? I felt very, I have done extensive work, whatever you want to call it. I've tried to put a lot of effort into the maintenance and growth of my spiritual condition, and I've also done the complete opposite. And I felt it both ways. And today I can see it, And I'll wrap it up just with 4 through 9, something very special happened in my life. I became connected to something that I didn't want, believe, or understand. Still don't really understand. But no question about it. There's just no question about it that when I'm sitting at home arguing with my wife when she's not even there, right? When that's happening, today I can see, today I could see that there's a way out of that, and there's a way out of that, out of those character defects, and it's always, and step 10 gets tied into this stuff too, because it always ends with turning my attention to someone I can help, and that's what I did that day, and that was a small example. Often the small things are what really get to me, The big stuff I'm on high alert, But the small stuff will really get to me, and I'll carry that stuff, and it'll block me, man. It'll block me, and I'll start thinking I don't need to do this, or I don't need to do that, or I'll start getting all high and mighty at work. They don't value me, all this stuff, and next thing I know, I'm stepping on the toes of the people around me, and they're retaliating, and I'm acting like they did this to me, And I can do that just as much now as I was doing when I was getting loaded. And the central fact of my life today is that I'm the real deal hopeless drug addict, and I will get loaded again. Outside of a miracle playing out of my life, as a result of doing this 4 through 9 stuff on a regular basis, I'm going to get loaded again, and that's what keeps me in the middle of this stuff. So I'm going to shut up now.
Good job, Brad.